let's get started. If you have not already done so, please start reading Daniels. It's a great book. You'll enjoy it. But you really should get started on it. We're now in the period where he's covering it, and there's important information in there. Also, quick show of hands. Anybody not fully situated in a lab group containing exactly 3 people? Anybody? Okay. Look around. You will identify yourself. Keep your hands up. Okay. So after class in the hallway, fill it out. Figure it out. Okay. Okay. Today we're going to turn to the settlement of Virginia. So we're finally almost putting Europe behind us and starting on the actual causes of mechanisms of populating North America, and Virginia being the first successful British settlement is logically the one we'll start with. The main points of today's lecture are these. First, like all colonies in British North America, Virginia did not turn out as expected. We'll go over what was expected, but you have sort of a sense, I think, from the Hakluyt reading. Virginia doesn't turn out quite like Hakluyt said. Virginia became, instead, a society that was completely dependent on racially defined slavery. Right? Remember, pointed out in the Hakluyt reading that what he had in mind, and he's writing in 1580, race played a very small role. Remember, the Cimarrons were going to live in harmony with the convicts, and they were all going to be English. Yet, despite this, the pervasiveness, the interdependence of the economy on slavery, Virginia developed, I should say, an ideology of radical equality. It's a little much to say they developed it, but there are 2 ideological strands that animate the American Revolution, and one of them is republicanism. It's been called republicanism. It has nothing to do with Republicans today, but that ideology is very much centered in Virginia, and that is the strand that stresses equality. I'll contrast that at the end of the lecture with the other strand, which is known as liberalism. They're not that far apart and somewhat subtle, and when we get to the Revolution next week, we'll spend more time on that. But it is an irony, a significant irony, I think, that the place within the 13 colonies that is most responsible for the all men are created equal part of the Declaration of Independence is a part that's also completely dependent on slavery. Right? Unhappy it is, though, to reflect that the once happy and peaceful plains of America are either to be drenched with the blood or inhabited by slaves. Sad alternative, but can a virtuous man hesitate in his choice? Washington said this after the Battle of Lexington and Concord. And, as noted, he owned 135 slaves. Now, to Washington's credit, on his death, he freed his slaves. That's a little more than can be said for some others. Thomas Jefferson, at his death, freed only those slaves to whom he was related. Okay, so here's the outline for how we'll do this today. Even though I just said we're moving on to America and leaving Europe behind, I'm going to spend a little bit of time cleaning up on Britain in 1600s and 1700s. That is what's happening in Britain while Virginia colony develops. Then we'll spend much more time on the history of Virginia. I've broken it up into these 4 periods. All these periodizations are fairly arbitrary, could have broken in different ways, but it's useful. It's useful to have some kind of structure. Otherwise, it's just this happened and then that happened. So we have the period of starvation and awful management, a period that then followed by a tobacco boom and reorganization, followed by the run-up to Bacon's Rebellion, and then the aftermath of Bacon's Rebellion, which is growth, stability, slavery, and populism. Right? And then we'll tie it all together with classical republicanism and the way in which slavery actually supports this classical republican ideology. And I want to credit this idea to Edmund Morgan, who writes this in a book called American Freedom, American Slavery. And I recommend that book strongly for your copious free time. Okay, are there questions so far? All right. Okay, then let's turn briefly to Britain in the 1600s and 1700s. The story of Polar Britain so far is of massive disorganization throughout the Tudor period. Massive, but getting better. Remember, they had the things were going well under Henry VII, and then Henry VIII came along and made a big mess that his successors struggled to clean up. By 1603, the death of Elizabeth, to some extent some of those problems are cleaned up. Most importantly, there's a religious settlement that, though shaky, as we'll see shortly, holds, in which England becomes an Anglican state, and what Anglicanism is fairly well defined, isolates the extremists, both the Catholics and the Puritans, who we'll talk about a bit in the next lecture. But there's still a long way to go. Britain's biggest problems in the 1600s and 1700s are overpopulation. I have a slide. These are slides that were part of the last lecture. Do you have a question? Oh, what a great question. Here's the Black Death in 1340. Actually, this graph is a little bit hard to see, but it's not quite, the resolution's a little fine. Population begins to fall generally before the Black Death, but it falls very precipitously in the 1340s. By 1500, England's population is not yet back to its pre-plague levels, but by 1600 it is, and as you see, it shoots ahead. So England has considerable population growth during the 1500s is kind of catch up, as you can see, but the 1600s and 1700s population grows a lot, and it's not the only country in Europe where this happens, but it's a little bit above normal trend. Here's the entire European population, as you can see. There's considerable growth, but nothing like this doubling between, about between 1500 and 1600, roughly doubling, right? We're going from about 2.5 million to about 5 million. Okay. And there is a sense of overpopulation. I mean, this is something that commentators write on, and they do it for the reasons that we'll get to in just a second. If you take a very rigid society and you impose, and it experiences rapid population growth, this is what happens. I mean, you get the growth in the lower classes, and here's why. This odd shape here kind of represents the English social system, if you will. And at the very top, you have the king, and below the king, you've got the peerage, and below them, the gentry. You see the nobility, in this sense. These are tightly controlled in number. In 1642, there are 122 peers. That's it. Okay? So the upper house, that is the upper peerage there, that's it, 122 of them. And below them, each of those people care a lot about these ranks. We don't have to, but they're ordered. It's hierarchy. Remember the great chain of being, everything is ordered in this period. But these people care a lot about their position. They hold on to it. They do that with primogeniture. They do that with marriage. The idea is that families that own land keep their land. Families that have title keep their title by giving it to the firstborn son. So the nobility is tightly tied up, and so is land. And as you go up this pyramid, land is very highly concentrated, and those 122 or so families plus the king own something in the neighborhood of 40% of land. So there's not all that much left for these lower classes. The skilled artisans are also protected more than one might think, because in a society there are guilds, and after the guilds there's a statute of artificers that is enacted to control the labor market. And one of its provisions is that you cannot practice any trade unless you first have an apprenticeship. So entry into these ranks is quite limited. So as the population grows, you've got a finite amount of land owned by a finite number of families. You've got tight control over many aspects of the labor market. The result is a lot of unemployment. And with no understanding of how the economy worked, the upper classes naturally blamed the victims. And the unemployed were seen, they were called sturdy rogues and vagabonds. They were assumed to be responsible for their unemployment. That ideology hasn't entirely gone away, but it's very strong. It's very strong at this point. So this is viewed as a significant problem for England, not only in terms of poverty itself, but also in terms of stability. If you're the people who have all this stuff, it's very worrisome to see all these very disorganized people down at the lower ranks here who are starting to commit some crimes and don't have a big stake in stability of society. Right? So we have overpopulation, we have sturdy rogues and vagabonds. I mentioned already this process of stumbling towards constitutionalism. I mentioned that in the context, remember, of Protestantism. Each time there's a new change in the way the church is going to work, the king has to call Parliament, and Parliament has to bless it. And when Parliament does that, Parliament gets more powerful. This process continues and gets, in fact, in some ways more disorganized. After Elizabeth, the next king is James I in 1603. He's the first Stuart. He's the King James of the King James Bible. So, as you might guess, he's Protestant. And though not a rabid Protestant in the sense that Edward VI was, but nonetheless, he made Catholics nervous, and they plotted against him. And in 1605, they attempted to blow up the House of Lords on the opening day of Parliament. This is known as the Gunpowder Plot, and it's the genesis of Guy Fawkes Day in England still. So there's still, what I'm trying to say here is that over this period of the 1600s and 1700s, we have first the poverty problem, we have the growing population problem, we have a development of constitutionalism, which doesn't, and we also have continuing turbulence between Protestants and Catholics, although by this time, well, there will be another Catholic king, briefly, but by this time it really doesn't look like the Catholics have much chance. It's really going to be a Protestant country. But it's the ascent of James II later on, and his audacity in having an heir that actually brings about, that's what triggers the Glorious Revolution, where the king is thrown out and Parliament picks a new king. And there we have the beginning of constitutional monarchy, because the Parliament has decided who is going to be king. That happens in the 1680s. Before we get there, we're going to have a civil war, but it's not a civil war between Catholics and Protestants. It's a civil war between Protestants and another kind of Protestant. Which, anyway, I don't want to go into details, but I want to give you the sense that while Virginia is growing, there's a lot of turmoil in England. Okay, questions? Good. All right. Okay, let's then turn to Virginia in 4 periods. So the first grade perhaps is the most puzzling. When the colonists arrive in 1607, they immediately begin starving, and yet they don't grow corn. The Chesapeake is not a very hostile environment. It is warm, so there are diseases, and that is a big problem. But in terms of finding food, it's not that bad. The Native Americans are believed to have spent on the order of 48 hours per person per year to grow enough calories to survive. They also supplemented that with hunting, but it's not a tough place. Population density is low. There's water. The Chesapeake Bay itself is teeming with slow-moving, easy-to-eat stuff. So it's a little bit of a mystery. Part of this has to do with the way the colonies, a lot of it has, in fact, all has to do with the way the colonies are organized. Remember, the king's poor. So the king relies on the Virginia Company, a joint stock company, to settle this place. Now, they are not entirely different from the way Hakluyt thinks, but they are a little bit different. Hakluyt, remember the reading that we did where he proposes that colony in the Straits of Magellan? Well, the one difference, I think, is that the Virginia Company's also got a profit motive. Hakluyt is talking really about geopolitical motives. That's somewhat shared. The Virginia Company is kind of a patriotic enterprise, but primarily, of course, it's a for-profit enterprise. And so what they're trying to do is make money. And the way they do that is to send colonists who quickly find something valuable. So in 1607, they send 105 settlers, and curiously, 35 of them are gentlemen. And gentlemen meaning they're probably second and subsequent sons of the gentry. So out of those 135, you got 35 gentlemen. You also must have at least as many of their personal servants. So a pretty sizable fraction of that 105 are people who are not going to do any work, or at least not any work for the colony. In 1608, 70 new settlers are sent. We know that included 28 gentlemen, again, another high proportion, 6 tailors, 2 goldsmiths, 2 refiners, 2 apothecaries, 1 jeweler, a perfumer, a blacksmith, and a tobacco pipe maker. So they're sending people who, well, maybe there's jewels there, maybe there's perfume. They're looking for some quick extractive sort of profit, and they're not finding any. What they did not send, and continue to not send, is farmers. And only farmers farm in this society. That's a little bit, slight exaggeration perhaps, but remember the statute of artificers that I mentioned rigidly controls who does what. This is the society that they come from. This is what they're used to. The appropriate thing for an artisan to do in this situation is to attempt to ply his trade, to look around. If there's gold, to smith it. If there's jewels, then to make jewelry. But once you don't find anything to make perfume out of, if you're a perfumer, you're done. You sit down. And nobody farms. The strategy they pursue instead is to steal corn from the Indians, which doesn't work very well because the Indians are armed. And they don't like it. So Indian relations are terrible, and starvation is more or less the rule of the day. When this is finally turned around briefly by John Smith, he does this by, he's a real tough son of a bitch, and he says, nobody, if you don't work, you don't eat. All he demanded of them was 4 hours a day. 4 hours a day, that's less than I'm asking you to do for this class. Right? Forced laughter. The period of starvation ends not because the Virginians learned how to grow food, they learn how to grow tobacco instead. And tobacco leads to a boom. In 1617, they send the first shipment of tobacco, and it brings back surprisingly huge profits, and that changes everything. Pretty soon, there's big money to be made. Tobacco, the economics of tobacco are pretty impressive. One person can grow something like 1,000 pounds of tobacco in a year, and that's on the order of 100 times what wages would be like in England. So there's definitely big money to be had, and that big money is to be had in controlling labor, right? It is possible for one person to do this, but the way life works in this period is you own land, and then you get yourself some indentured servants. That's the way this is done. The indenture system grows up right around this time. I'm not sure if it is the Virginia Company that developed it directly or if it's around the Sugar Islands, but it grows out of the apprentice system in England at the time, and it works in the following way. You're poor. I'm a ship captain. You want to go to Virginia? We make a deal. I take you to Virginia, and then I sell you. Or I sell your labor for a finite term of years that we agree upon ahead of time. Usually for longer if you're younger. So 4 to 7 years is typical. And whoever I sell your indenture contract to, you work for that person. Okay? So this is, in some sense, real innovation because it turned labor into a commodity that could be traded, and it facilitated some migration. The other thing that facilitated migration in this period was a reorganization of the Virginia Company. Virginia Company had gone 9 or 10 years without any profit, so there was a certain amount of dissent among the owners. And Edwin Sandys was one of or Sandys, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, was one of the prominent owners, and he's also a famous parliamentarian at this time. So he sort of butts heads with James. In any case, Sandys proposes reorganization, which is very much in keeping with this. He realizes at this time that the only asset Virginia really has is land. They're not going to find any perfume. They're not going to grow any silk. There's no gold. There's no silver. So the only way you're going to make land valuable is to increase the population. So he puts into place policies that do this. And some of those policies are encouraging indenture. He adds a sharecropping system where you can come to Virginia and work for 7 years and split the profits with the Virginia Company in return for your passage. He sends women, not always of their own free will. One Virginia Company officer is hung, drawn, and quartered for tricking daughters of yeomen into this racket. And he also interestingly raises money to put up schools, civilize Indians. So there's this idealistic aspect as well. Most interesting of all, though, what Sandys does to increase the population of Virginia is to change the frame of government. Right? So prior to Sandys, what they had was something called laws, martial, moral, and divine. And this was basically a rehash of John Smith's rules. It was all about punishment, really, all about it included the death penalty for such things as saying bad things about the governor. This was a very brutal system. And that did a lot to discourage people from wanting to go. Imagine that. He does away with that and instead introduces a House of Burgesses, which is an elected position, an elected assembly that will be elected by each town. That's the first representative government in North America, and in many ways it's more democratic than England at this time. So the interesting thing is first that that's democratic. The second that even here in the early 1600s, that's a selling point. And that's a way of getting Englishmen to go. It's not just about money, it's also about that self-government. Remember, we saw that in Hakluyt too. Englishmen will always want to govern themselves. So, let me see. Okay, Sandys is somewhat successful. The English population does increase considerably during this time. We'll see that on this timeline, where we see the population in blue is the total population, the African-American population shown in gold. Sandys comes in around here, the end of the starvation period, not quite a little before the charter is revoked, and the population does finally begin to rise. Not fast enough. Well, fast enough, I should say, that it definitely inconvenienced the Native Americans. And in 1622, Opechancanough, who is the head of the Powhatan Confederacy, hatches a scheme and massacres about 300 settlers. Right? So it's very well orchestrated. He sees that the population of Virginia is growing too fast. He sees that their only hope is to slaughter them right now. By that time, there's actually quite a bit of trade and an association between the Native Americans and the Virginians. There's a lot of Native Americans who are working in these tobacco plantations. So they had access. And the plan was the English were tipped off, but nonetheless, because Virginia was so spread out, there was quite a lot of bloodshed. About 300 settlers were killed. By 1624, as a result of this and other things, the king notices that despite having sent about 4,500 people since 1607, there are only 1,200 alive. And so he revokes the charter. And at that point, Virginia becomes a royal colony instead of a joint stock enterprise. That brings us to this period towards Bacon's rebellion. And the interesting thing here is the demographic story. Right? By around the 1630s, the mortality rate starts to fall. And the reason for that is probably because they learned to grow, the orchards finally started coming in. And so instead of drinking the filthy water, they drank hard cider. And that was better for them by quite a lot. So once the mortality rate started to fall, population began to rise. And the indenture deal wasn't as good anymore. In the early part of this period, if you could survive your indenture, you did all right in Virginia. Land was cheap, and there's plenty of it. So if you could get there on an indenture, and you could work for 4 or 7 years, survive, you could make it. And there really was a kind of upward mobility. But after a while, because of this head right, one of Sandys's innovations was called head right, in which he granted 50 acres, 500 acres, I think, to anyone who paid somebody else, who paid for transport. Right? So it sweetened the deal. If you bought an indenture, for example, you stood by the dock and bought an indenture, someone got off the ship. In addition to the labor, you'd also have a right to acres, that land that the colony threw in for free. That was just to induce more people to come. Right. So you got corruption. I've got head